Hello, and welcome back to the Paris Air Forum. My name's Tim Heifer from Reuters, and I'm joined here today from the United States by Steve Timm, who is the president of Collins Aerospace, one of the world's largest and most important aerospace suppliers, handling everything from aerostructures to avionics and seats. And there are perhaps few people better qualified than Steve to talk to us about trends in this very difficult time in the aerospace industry. He comes from a distinguished aviation family with transatlantic links. In fact, it was one of Steve's relatives who gave Charles Lindbergh his instructions for his historic flight. Steve took on his role in February this year, having spent, I think, about 25 years in the company, specializing in avionics. He's a private pilot himself, and we look forward to discussing with him his views on this crisis and what aviation will look like as we come out of it. Steve, welcome to the Paris Air Forum.
Thank you, Tim. Happy to be here.
So, as I said, you started your role in February, and it sounds as though you chose a good year to take over running an aerospace company.
Well, we always preach to our leaders it's important to be adaptable, and this is a year of demonstrating that ourselves. And we're watching the aerospace industry, of course, adapt and now prepare ourselves for what's going to take to emerge stronger.
Well, of course, it's been a year of tremendous upheaval. You have had to adapt, as everybody else has. The economic consequences for the industry have been absolutely unprecedented. I want to start, though, if I may, with some of the news we've seen in recent weeks. There have been two important breakthroughs on vaccines, perhaps others to come. So how does this change your perception of the recovery or the shape of recovery we might expect?
Yeah, great question. I will tell you that for us, and I think it's probably the same context you'll get from many of the others that you talked to about the shape of the recovery. Let's talk about that and then the impact of the vaccine good news that we're hearing. Our vantage point is like many others, and you're seeing with IATA and the reports of the recovery that look at kind of the end of 23, early 24 to get back to 2019 levels. And so we know it's not really a V, it's more of a recovery that's more of a U shape. And what's the great news is that the vaccines look to be on track for what we anticipated as we see that recovery improve between now 20 to 21 and into 22. Our vantage point early on is that while we're down, most of it's international travel, we're going to see good improvement the second half of 2021, some of that boost we all need to see. And so with Moderna recently announced they have vaccine trials that show almost 95% efficacy, as well as Pfizer and the German biotechnology firm BioNTech at similar levels. It really says that by the end of this year, and the news came out today that I believe Pfizer said they'll actually apply for licensing here for distribution. It could be as early as December. That's what we expected, to have one, if not two, ready by the end of this year to start distribution in the first quarter here of 2021. Now, of course, what's going to happen is that a lot of those doses and distribution becomes the key. It would be a good thing to talk about is, we know that almost 1 million doses can be put on a freighter, and those doses have to be obviously sent around the world. I think Pfizer said earlier this week they could have 50 million distributed around the world here. And in that translates, interestingly enough, to about 16,000 freighter flights to get that distributed around the world at 1 million doses per flight. That says it's going to take 24 months to distribute those around the world. And what's interesting to me, of course, that's going to go to the frontline workers, the essential workers, et cetera, right away. And of course, then get to the broader population. What we watch very closely is just that vaccine prioritization after the essential workers knows they're high risk. What we know is that there's probably going to be within 28 days the requirement for a booster. Historically, only 50% of people get those. So what's really important for us is to make sure the distribution happens and then that people are getting those vaccines, because at the end of the day, the thing that's going to improve that recovery curve from the 23, 24 timeframe to the left for this industry and really for the well-being of the global population is that we get that to happen sooner and that people do get the vaccine and the booster. And what I'm particularly interested in is what we can control within aerospace to add another layer of protection, where not only do we distribute the vaccines and help make sure that's occurring, but that we add the layer of protection where now the borders can be opened. And we'll get to that probably in this discussion. But the key thing for us is creating a very safe journey through the airport, onto the airplane, and then letting the authorities in the countries and the states have the confidence that the passengers on those flights are healthy. And this gives us a step towards that. So we're optimistic that by the middle of next year, we're going to start seeing broad populations of deployment of vaccine and really begin to move that curve of recovery forward. And that would be so beneficial for everyone. And obviously aerospace who has been hit so hard by this pandemic.
It's very interesting what you said about the resources that would have to be deployed to move these vaccines. I haven't heard those figures, but from what you said, it's going to take quite a long time just to physically roll out these vaccines. So we're still looking at a crisis that's going to drag on for quite some time.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is that we need the vaccines to get approved, and now the logistics will become the primary focus. And the key, obviously, is people also getting the vaccine. You know, the Moderna one doesn't require it, but the Pfizer does, a negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit of refrigeration. And so you can think about the transportation logistics and challenges of maintaining those vaccines at that temperature for logistics and travel, whether it's in an aircraft or if it's in, just in the areas for being distributed for distribution to people. So it's going to be a challenge, but it's something that obviously, and this is where I think it's good to talk about innovation, because as an aerospace industry, I think the pressure of difficult situations has always watched us step up to do more. We're personally talking about converting passenger jets to freighters and working with the OEMs and the airlines to do that. Which of course we have cargo systems, so we're interested in helping do that as quickly as we can. And we're interested in helping the airports, the airplanes, as you and I've talked about before, make sure that people can safely and confidently get through the travel situations that allow that distribution, and then of course the broader travel to occur.
So before we get on to that, let's just think about where we are right now. So as far as you can tell, obviously it's very difficult to be certain about anything at the moment, but as far as you can tell, are we currently in the low point of this crisis? Is there a realistic possibility it gets even worse from here?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm probably not the person to predict it, but I will tell you how we're thinking about it. What we're seeing here, kind of this second wave, and I was examining the data just yesterday in terms of what it's doing around the different regions of the world, and Europe's in particularly being hard hit with not just flattening, but as we approach some of the end of the year holidays, we're seeing that travel is not being recommended. And it really reminds me of the importance of right now, what I see happening is that the bunker mentality and playing defense is occurring. It's the best protection we have without better testing and of course the vaccine. What I'd like to see aerospace doing is turning our attention to play offense on helping the authorities have the technology, helping the authorities have the policy that allows, once the testing and the vaccines are available, to show some light at the end of the tunnel, that while these flare-ups occur, and they will around the world, that there's some hope. People need to know that the fatigue they're experiencing with COVID today has the opportunity to be resolved in 2021. And at least to start with a very good start for seeing that opportunity of improvement in 2021. And I think that's important. We're going to be a good year into watching the world continue to play defense and struggle with what it is, and it's horrible the impact it's having on our obviously the people, our communities, and of course the economics around the world. And so to watch something come out, positive news around the availability of the vaccines, watch them be distributed this next year, watch people begin to return to some level of normal, it's so important for, I think, our psyche as well as our economy and our health, of course. So we're excited to see 2021 bring some of those opportunities to see some good news emerge as we recover from this.
So the vaccines, if and when they are widely available, will presumably address a lot of people's personal worries about their health. But what about when they go to the airport until then? A lot of people are worried, is it safe? They're worried, is it safe on a plane? Is it safe to stand in the sky in the bridge that takes you to the plane? Am I going to be in contact with people when I'm lining up to have my hand luggage inspected and so forth? What can the industry do to appease these concerns and get people traveling again?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, there's been a lot of effort focused on how safe is the airport, how safe are airplanes. And I'm here to tell you that from the assessments that we've done, from the third-party assessments we've seen recently come out through the industry and outside the industry, we know that flying on an airplane actually is quite safe. Traveling through the airport is quite safe. The challenge we experience is the quarantining that's occurring on the other end, where people are interacting in ways that create perhaps a less controlled environment. Let's go to the airplane for a second. We are focused today on systems that we know Collins provides, for example, the air handling systems that provide the filtering systems, the HEPA filters that provide a safe environment at surgical quality levels on the airplane. So we're confident that the airplane is safe. The procedures that are being put in place with respect to the cleaning practices by the airlines are quite thorough as well. And of course, it's important to wear masks. We know, as many of the studies are showing, the number one thing you can do is wear the mask and continue to make sure that you're washing your hands, being clean, et cetera. The thing that we're looking into that even takes it further is some of the technologies that are exciting here are things like touchless lavatory, where we know that you've got the ability to get into the lab and know that you're not dealing with all the touch requirements there. We're looking at antimicrobial seats as an example as well, and some of the technologies that are on the airplane. The other one is on the airports. The airports are interesting. And this is one where we had started this long before COVID had emerged into a touchless airport journey. As you're walking through an airport, from the time you have a wireless experience or a touchless experience, both for your boarding pass, a touchless experience for dropping off your bag, a touchless security experience, as well then as a boarding experience through biometrics that identifies who you are and then gets onto the plane safely. We know we have those systems today, those systems exist, and those being deployed should give passengers confidence that the environment is safe. I think the last link here is actually the collaboration needs to occur then for the health testing and the vaccines ultimately to validate someone's health as you traverse through the airport and onto the airplane. And that is, think of this. Think of in a biometric environment, you have all the wireless, touchless experience that I just explained, and now you're able to get on the airplane and know that everyone else has been tested and everyone else is safe at that time. The confidence levels go up, and that same validation, think of a health passport as an example, and there's a lot of discussions about how to create that health passport, could give the border authorities of any country or any state the confidence that the people that are disembarking from that airplane are healthy, and the quarantine period goes away, and now they've got safe people coming into their countries and their states. That is the connection that we need to create as we collaborate across this industry for taking the technologies that already exist that Collins can provide and others can provide, and working together to get them integrated into our airports, onto our airplanes, but most importantly, the policies that allow that freedom of travel to occur with confidence of health of the flying publics. And that's the piece that you're going to see switch from, is the airplane safe? Is the airport safe? How do we get the safety that we know exists to let people move freely without the restrictions of a quarantine?
So how would that work? The health passport, can you just talk a little bit more about the biometric? So I turn up at the airport and basically my face is my passport. Is that roughly how it works?
Yeah, that happens today. So many times you've seen on even any international travel, many of the airlines have instituted biometrics. So your boarding pass isn't even used. You're essentially, once you've checked in, the biometrics validates your identity and then gives you and then boards you, and it's been tied to your boarding pass and your travel itinerary. Similarly, what you can do is take the health information that might come from a test or from a vaccine validated through a medical authority onto a digital health passport, that then is integrated with your travel itinerary. And in that, as you travel into the checkpoints through an airport from check-in to boarding, the biometric validation that occurs with you today about who you are also validates your health validation. And, I take this back to what we saw after 9/11. We saw the airplane take on new capabilities from a technology perspective. The cabins were protected, the procedures by the airlines were changed, and of course, security procedures in the airports. And that was an added layer of security that was there to make sure that we were safe from a threat of terrorism. Now it's a very, very similar thought process. The threat's just different. Rather than validating our identity for safety purposes, we have to validate our health. And what we need to do in that health passport is make sure the systems that we know already exist can tie the biometrics now, not only to your identity, but tie it to your health. And I think that is the next layer that you will see. And in 3 or 4 years, we'll look at each other having this conversation. And much like we think about how we travel through an airport today with those new security procedures that were implemented after 9/11, we're going to see a same thought process, I believe, about validating our respective health for travel.
But for that to work, presumably, in some way, aspects of my health records would have to be tied in with this. Who is going to keep these records? How are you going to address the privacy concerns that are almost certainly likely to be raised?
I think that's the key issue, Tim, that probably is going to get wrestled with here among the authorities. And you're seeing that now. I know Mayo Clinic, I know others that have these health passport applications, and there's segregation of health data in these applications that allows it to not be exposed to the cloud, that it's only for the purposes of the journey. And then after the journey's over, after it's associated with you, it'd be cleansed. And those systems behind the scenes, how they're integrated into the airport and airplane systems, I'm confident can occur. What we really need to happen is the government authorities need to engage proactively here with the technology providers, whether it be the applications for health passports or those like Collins Aerospace that can bring the solutions both in the airports and the airplanes to be integrated. And once you integrate those together is the key answer. The answer to your question, I think, is going to be one that has to be wrestled with proactively. I think you're seeing a lot of messaging by aerospace leaders in the press about the importance of our officials to get proactively engaged in solving the kind of answers to the questions that you're asking. And technology's there. It's about the process and the integration of the technologies that's going to be needed to make this problem get solved.
But they're not really doing that, though, are they? There are almost as many regimes for inspections, quarantines, and health rules as there are countries in the world at the moment. What is you work in a global industry, so I'm not asking about any particular country, but how do you think governments have responded to this, and what needs to be done better to get to the point that you've just described?
Well, I think what needs to be done better is that there needs to be reach across the various government entities about how they're going to solve this problem. I think everyone's playing defense. You're seeing the frustrations emerge in the press with respect to the leaders in our industry saying you're playing defense, and in the meantime, we're not making progress on this. What's going to happen when vaccines are available? We know that we can validate the health of people, but people are still locked down because we can't validate that the people on an airplane arriving in the country are healthy, and therefore they can't travel without quarantine, which means now they aren't traveling. So, these are the same kinds of challenges we've had in other times. That's why I bring up 9/11. We had to implement security procedures across government authorities, different state entities, and the same thing's happening now. And so people like myself and others are actively meeting with our government officials to say, we need you to know that these technologies exist. And if the economy is going to recover and people are going to begin to travel again to spearhead and be a catalyst for that growth, we've got to get together and solve these problems in a coordinated manner. And the only way to do that is to reach out and get our officials talking and be aware of the capabilities that we offer. And that's the thing we're really focused on is getting them to not be playing defense and the bunker mentality, play offense. Let's go get together and figure out how to take these pieces and put them together for the goodness of our people and of course our economies collectively, which right now are waiting for that to occur. The pressure couldn't be greater for that collaboration to occur.
So what sort of cost are we talking about here? I mean, let's just say that the whole suite of things from touchless lavatories to antimicrobial materials and all of the other measures you've described were rolled out in let's say, a benign regulatory environment. How much is that going to cost? And will that be reflected in higher airfares?
Yeah, good question, Tim. I don't have the answers to questions like that yet because I think the integration cost isn't well understood. But here's what I do know. I do know that when I think about what we've done to deploy these types of technologies at other airports, the efficiency that it's created and the confidence it's created allowed the economy to flow will pay for itself. And I think what you're finding now, and it's really encouraging by me, is to watch the aerospace leaders not get parochial around this. You're watching competitors come together. You're watching the typical OEMs and the supply base come together to say, how do we solve this problem? Because when you float the economy higher, you're going to float really the ability to solve these problems, and they'll pay for themselves. In the meantime, we're making difficult decisions to continue to resize based on a lower level of business because people aren't flying. It all starts with getting people flying safely from point A to point B. And so clearly the economics have to be played through, but I'm confident that based upon the impacts of what we're seeing today, we'll find ways to make those models work as we have in the past.
Do you see, perhaps as a result of this, the sort of technologies you're talking about sort of spread from the aircraft right through to the main entrance of the airport, yeah? Perhaps even beyond. So your customer's going to be different. You're going to be working in a slightly different environment. You're not perhaps going to be so tied to the aircraft as you have been.
Yeah, go ahead, ask your question. I like where you're going here.
Well, I mean, obviously this plays to the advantage. You might not like the whole of the question. It plays to the advantage of newly integrated and very, very large companies like yours. You've just been through this this very, very important merger, now part of Raytheon Technologies. So you're going to be providing products that basically affect the way we travel through the airport onto the plane. That offers some possibility of leveraging technologies, but it also gives you enormous potential sort of power, perhaps monopolistic power over the whole air travel process. So how do you see that balance?
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, I'm excited about the way to solve these problems is to integrate, and to integrate whether it's across companies or across authorities, that's going to be required. And what I'm particularly excited about and getting the opportunity to lead Collins Aerospace is that we have many of the systems that are part of that equation. I know that in the hallways of our company, which is the historic brands of some very, very historically strong companies that have shaped aerospace, have the potential to reshape it in new ways, but in a collaborative way. Let me give you a couple of examples I think are so important, and then you'll see that it's really a cog in the wheel of this integration challenge that we're talking about solving. Everything's becoming more connected, and Collins Aerospace has a pedigree that's traditionally been focused on the airplane and the airports, with our brands like AirInc in the airports and the safety communications that occur with airplanes. And of course, as you know, we have systems across all domains on an airplane. And we call, and have coined a term that it's not new from us, but it's connected ecosystem. And the key is that we have centers of excellence around the world, in Europe and the US, that have capabilities on systems to collect data to help us make the systems on the airplane more efficient, whether that's for purposes of becoming more efficient in its performance, for saving fuel and money for the airlines, to contributing to a more sustainable environment. And now, as part of Raytheon Technologies, we actually have the capabilities with some of our Raytheon companies to look at the airspace. And what I see now is the opportunity to integrate this aircraft as a node on a network to be more efficient as it operates within the airspace, allowing us to solve some of the problems that are ailing us today that contribute to a less sustainable air environment, one for which we need to really focus on solving. So I look at it as opportunity. It's the attitude and culture we bring around working together with our customers, whether it's an OEM on an airplane, whether it's the airports and the authorities. The answer for solving these questions like we're talking about on COVID, or whether it's efficiency and sustainability, are going to require tremendous cooperation. And I think you're going to see that we've got a history and a reputation for being a trusted brand because we do collaborate. We put the customer first. We put the solutions that are capable of solving the problems together and integrating them in a way that create win-win solutions. And that's the way you sustain success in this market, is not to be one that's doing it at the expense of someone. You do it together. And I'm so excited that we've got key areas like connected ecosystem, looking at electric airplanes. We've got autonomous solutions we're building to create more efficiency in airplanes and the airspace. So those pieces, happy to give you some examples, because those are the things that show that we're investing multiple $billion per year to put those pieces together for the goodness that creates value for the end customer and for the environment.
Okay, well, let's come on to some of the business pressures and opportunities, if to the extent that they're visible at the moment. As we come out of this crisis, people have talked a lot about how quickly traffic may or may not come back. What's less clear, perhaps, is how quickly profitability will return. How do you see that playing out? Is this going to perhaps be a slightly lackluster recovery in terms of profits? Because if people are not traveling essentially on business class, for example, and driving those airline profits, that's going to come back and hit you in some way, presumably.
Well, the direct answer to that is it's hitting the entire aerospace industry in a very impactful material way, as it is the rest of the world. Aerospace has been, I would say, impacted more so because of just its dependence on international travel. Clearly, we're seeing some bankruptcies in airlines. We're seeing them really struggle with reductions. And when that happens to the airlines, of course, that happens to the supply base. We're extremely concerned and continue to examine our supply base. The governmental funding, things like CARES Act and other supplemental funding, have been important to help bridge the gap here as we get to recovery. And what we're going to see here as we get into 2020, where we were, we're probably 50% down from 19 levels, we're going to see that come up to 30% ultimately in 2022, maybe 10 or 20% below previous levels. But we know that international is lagging that recovery, and that's where, of course, airlines, because of the business travel, have most of their opportunity to make money and profitability, as you're asking. The focus then, and this comes back to the very discussion, if you said to me, what's the one thing we can do to help? It's to move that recovery curve that doesn't have us at the end of 2023 and 24 to the left. And the way you do that is you get people traveling. And the way you get people traveling is through safe confidence that is on the airplanes and the airports, check, in my opinion. And now you get into the point of getting open borders that don't have people being restricted by quarantine. So I hate to be repetitive and redundant, Tim, but the truth of the matter is the recovery is dependent upon integrating these solutions and capabilities to give health confidence to the authorities that let people travel more freely. And that's what's going to boost the recovery for the airlines and the supply base that they depend upon. And so we're making the tough decisions, as is our everyone in the industry, about how we resize ourselves to this lower level of activity and therefore lower level of business. We'll get through it, but not without some tremendous sacrifice. And so we're all focused on the recovery, because the more we can recover, the more we can get focused looking forward and not looking backward.
What do you think will happen to business travel? I mean, we're talking, and it's very smooth on this international video link, which is now accessible to everybody on the internet. Everybody knows about Zoom. Will business travel come back as it was before? What are you telling your own people? You have to manage cost. Are you going to be signing off on people's travel requests to travel around the world as much as you used to? Or are you going to permanently change in this direction?
Well, we're looking here for a shift. We're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing because of the restrictions that are in place right now. And so it's really the essence of controlling our costs today, but it's not cost driven as much as it is just based upon the safety of our employees and the restrictions that exist. If your customers aren't opening the doors, then you're not going to go take the time to fly and meet them yet until we have the safe environment. But once this testing improves, as we know it is, and more importantly, the vaccines come out, you're going to see things begin to open up. Now, I will tell you that we're a company that's founded on relationships and trust, and you don't do that virtually. I think you will see more virtual, there is no doubt. But the novelty of how we used virtual experiences early in COVID from, say, February until October has begun to become matched with some level of fatigue I think, from some of the business leaders who understand the importance of getting together with our customers more than just virtual as you build those relationships and collaborate to solve problems. One of the things that's really interesting from an innovation perspective, at least we can say this within Collins and I think all of aerospace, is the performance virtually continues to exist. We're watching ourselves meet our commitments to our customers, both for product delivery, but virtually through our engineering teams that are working virtually in some cases, and others in the labs within our facilities safely. But what you're starting to see is that if we're not careful, the day-to-day interaction and collaboration that allows us to continue to innovate and solve tomorrow's problems requires some interaction. I don't think that's going to go away. And so I think virtual, while it will become a bigger part of how we work, we expect that we'll have less office space requirements in the future as Collins, but that's not mutually exclusive to the need to go meet with our customers on a regular basis to understand insightful ways of the problems they're trying to solve and how we can help innovate to solve those problems. So when the short answer is when the vaccines are deployed and we have herd immunity, which we know we'll expect the journey to start here in early 2021, we expect to see our people traveling and meeting with our customers the same way we were pre-COVID. And we'll use both the virtual tools when necessary, but we'll use the in-person experience to go make sure that we are continuing to be a trusted brand that's solving some of our most difficult challenges we know exist. So I think it's a combination of both, but I believe you'll see that travel begin to resume as the safety and the borders open and allow it to occur.
That's a very interesting vote of confidence in business travel. One of the reasons I asked you about that is that an important part of your business is the interiors business, which you bought some years ago and is now part of your integrated company. Business class seats, let alone first class seats, very expensive pieces of, very complex pieces of equipment. I presume that's also where the highest margins are in this business. Are you going to have to adjust your planning and your expectations for those sorts of areas of your business to take account perhaps of less demand on a structural level in the future?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, and that's one of the things that I'm so excited about with the opportunity to lead this business, and I mean it genuinely, is that the solutions that we've generated for years to create success for our customers and for our company are really the ingredients for the systems we're thinking about tomorrow. It's those things I talked about. We're continuing to pivot towards the things that are focused on tomorrow's problems. And so while those portfolios that exist across the 6 strategic business units at Collins are historically relevant to the brands that we've all talked about, before, it's the things we're talking about in the future that pivot towards connected ecosystem, the electrified airplane, new aerostructures that create fuel efficiency around, like nacelles you're seeing we're working with key OEMs on, better performing engines, lower fuel cost, and better acoustics from an advanced structures perspective, autonomous operations, in things like connected battle space in the military parts of our market segments. And what that means to me, Tim, is that the solutions of yesterday have to continue to be advanced towards the capabilities of tomorrow. And every one of those that I just mentioned largely is a more focused, integrated solution. It's taking the pieces that we have around connectivity, the networks and the central nervous system of the airplane and our avionics, our electric systems and power systems as we advance into more electric. You're going to see those things just advance as you always have into the next generation solution. What I think Collins brings is the ability to integrate those together with our customers to solve some of their most challenging problems, and that integration is the key. So I think again we have some of the systems that you talk about that are so important to our business, but pivoting them into these areas that I'm talking about is so important to our future.
I want to come back to the electric aeroplanes and connectivity that you mentioned. Just pausing for a moment on the sort of business trends that we might see. I mean, in the civil side of your business, which we're mainly talking about today, 2 of the things which seem clear at the moment may change is that nobody is building new planes, and airlines are talking about retiring old planes earlier. Now, your business, I believe, is split roughly half and half between supplying parts for new planes and servicing parts on old planes. So that sounds like a rather worrying double whammy for you.
Yeah, it is. That's again, you got it right. Our business is focused on obviously providing some of the best generation products into OEMs as they produce. And you're watching Airbus and Boeing, primarily in the commercial airspace, continue to look for their rate adjustments as they come into 2021. And what we do know is we're seeing increased retirements. So we used to see in like 2018 around 500 retirements per year. We think that's going to triple in 2020, 2021 to about 1,500. And then maybe double in the remaining years from the baseline of 500 into that 1,000 in the outer years. What that creates is a lower need for airplanes. For roughly every new airplane, and another airplane needs to retire just based on pure demand curves today. And so, yeah, it is an area of focus for us from an aftermarket perspective to make sure that we're supporting obviously the needs of our customers from a parts and from a repair perspective, while continuing to provide the new systems into our customers as they need. So again, it gets right back to the same point. We've got to help the recovery occur faster, because continuing to just let ourselves play defense here is going to see that curve slow and impact the entire industry. It all starts back to that same topic.
And what about your own suppliers? You mentioned those earlier. You have, I think you told me, 600,000 parts you make. Is that right?
We do.
I wonder how your supply chain and your suppliers are handling this crisis. Do you think that they're beginning to turn the corner? Are there some signs of stability in what you're seeing in terms of their robustness?
So far, so good.
Pour l'instant, tout va bien. Nous avons des centaines d'équipementiers dans le monde et nous restons en contact avec eux toutes les semaines pour nous assurer aussi d'aider aussi les équipementiers, les fournisseurs plus petits pour qu'ils aient suffisamment de financement. Je pense qu'il y aura encore plus de financement en 2021 pour ceux qui sont le plus en difficulté. Donc,
we're all in this together. Keeping our supply base healthy in support of our customers as they continue to start to ramp up the new production is important. And so it's really important for us that as we're a link in that chain, that it's not just about us, it's about making sure that all of us are working closely together and that recovery can be accelerated. So I think so far so good, Tim. We've got in those 8,000, we continue to see which ones are closed. Right now, all of our suppliers are open, some at a reduced capacity. Obviously, many of those suppliers, depending on the components, are working outside just the aerospace industry. So we are monitoring it closely and maintain some level of cautious optimism around recovery as we start to get into 2021. The good news is, you'd asked earlier about the floor. Our lowest level of traffic activity in the second quarter here is, as we look into 2021, despite this slower trajectory of recovery, we are seeing a level of traffic activity expected that is not insignificant, double-digit growth quarter over quarter for the remainder of 2021. We just need to make it happen faster as the vaccines get brought to the populations and people remain confident and become confident in air travel with open borders.
Let's look internationally. Aviation requires contact between nations. It requires people to travel to do business, as you were talking about. This crisis seems to have amplified questions about whether globalization has gone too far. That's obviously very relevant for the aerospace and airline industries. Do you think that we're going to come to a world which offers sort of limitless possibilities of being technologically connected, but which is becoming politically fragmented and disconnected? In a sense, history is moving against everything that you've achieved so far in this industry. So my question really, Steve, is, do you think that the wind has changed and, this sort of globalized sort of cocktail of benign forces that propel, the things that propelled aviation for so long, they're just running out of steam. You're going to be facing a much tougher market in future? What's your view on that?
Yeah, it's very complex question. I think we're seeing in some cases as pressures continue and trade pressures and friction exist in different segments of the world. What you realize is that we are inextricably linked together as a global economy, from the supply base to our customers, and it all really the populations of all of our respective countries. And as a global country, as a global company, we are a European company. We are an American company, and frankly, we're a company around the world in Asia as well. And so it's important for us, for our employees around the world, to see ourselves maintain a global approach, and that we'll continue that global approach. It's why we think about how we interact with suppliers around the world, how we interact with bringing technology solutions to solve the world's problems. And for us, it's about sustainability as well, making sure that we're bringing solutions that provide for a long-term sustainment of Earth and of the world here. And so for us, while I think we sometimes take one step back, we're continuing on focus on bringing solutions that allow us to go 2 steps forward. And while we're seeing some of that kind of isolation in a couple of areas of the world, I think you'll continue to see that they open up, because it's so important for the people of each country to have the opportunity to continue to interact in a global economy. I don't think the global economy is going away, and I think you're going to see the continued solutions we bring to open that up in a sustainable way.
One of the big areas of friction at the moment is between the United States and China, both in terms of trade and now in terms of arms sales to Taiwan. Now, China has hit back with measures against 3 companies, including Raytheon, for the sale of systems, which I believe includes some Collins systems to Taiwan. Is that going to affect your business relations in general terms with China?
I don't think so. Remember, Collins Aerospace is the company with which, of course, I lead. And one of the things that you'll know about Collins Aerospace is we have a tremendous historical relationship with our customers around the world, including China. We're a key supplier on the C919. We're a key supplier on the regional jets as well. And I think our futures are linked together as we continue to provide the systems that help those airplanes be successful as well. And so with all the airlines that are in China, for which we've got a long history of helping them be successful as well, we expect to continue that under the Collins Aerospace company. And so it's important to us. Clearly, we're watching carefully the sensitivities that exist here globally, geopolitically, but our focus, the things we can control, is maintaining those important relationships for helping us collectively be successful together.
Now, the other sort of big debate in the industry is obviously about the environment, carbon emissions. This was the big debate. Perhaps that's what we would have been mainly talking about if we'd had this conversation last year.
Right.
Those trends don't seem to be going away. If anything, the pressure for sustainable aviation is going to increase as a result of this crisis. So what are the technologies, what are going to be the winning technologies that solve aviation's carbon problem?
Great question. And, I will tell you right away that, these disrupted travel habits we have present an opportunity for this industry really to step up. And you're starting to see that from some of the companies that are being more progressive here. I will tell you right away, we invest multiple $1 billion a year annually on R&D. And frankly, the majority of those are in areas where we know it's linking to improved environmental performance of aircraft, as well as how the aerospace industry contributes to sustainability. Let me give you some examples. Aerodynamic and acoustics, like solutions I brought up earlier with our next generation nacelles. They're designed to optimize engine performance, fuel burn, noise footprint of engines as an example. One I'm really excited about, and I've got a really neat example I'll share with you, Tim, is autonomy and connectivity. How we optimize routes using artificial intelligence and data to reduce fuel burn. Here's a really good example I love to share. We did a trial with an airline using a new application we have. It's called Fuel Planning Optimizer. And what it allows you to do is basically with the interaction with the airspace, again, part of what Raytheon Technologies and Collins working together have been able to create here, is an application that allows you to request improved flight routes that improve fuel burn. And so we demonstrated in that particular pilot how much fuel we could save. Now, here's what's interesting about it. If you extrapolate that pilot that we did into the broader industry, the industry today annually burns about 100 billion gallons of fuel, right? And I was looking at the math of that. If you just take and save 475 million gallons of fuel, which is what our pilot proved per year, and you look at the carbon contribution of what that would be through reduced carbon, I think that the number I saw was 4.7 million tons of reduced carbon per year. And so what you start to think about is whether it's the nacelle example through the advanced structures, the connectivity in these artificial intelligence solutions, electrified aircraft systems that allow us to help with fuel savings as well, and then lighter and more sustainable materials, things like thermoplastics and additive manufacturing. Those are all areas we're investing in aggressively that we know solves challenges for our customers, but also do it in a way that really contributes to improved sustainability. And frankly, I could go on. You know, we're working with more than 10 sustainability projects just in the UK, France, Germany, Poland, and Ireland alone. Everything from lightweight motors and power electronics to new air circulation solutions, energy management, climate management. The list goes on of the things that we're doing to try to make sure that while we're being focused on this recovery we talk about, we do it in a sustainable way, a way that we know is going to contribute in very material ways to our industry and more importantly to the world.
Where do you stand with you have a project called Project 804. You're a fan, it's a hybrid electric project. This is technology that you seem to be keen on. Where do you stand on that? It's been delayed, but for how long?
Yeah, we continue to invest in the components we think are necessary to move along to see the technology advance. So while we've delayed it from a project perspective, the technological components continue to be moving forward. You know, I'll give you an example. One of our advances in hybrid electric propulsion, and it's actually in Europe. We're looking at advanced propeller designs with our Fisiac company. So motors to enable a hybrid electric flight, reducing fuel burn up to 10% and CO2 emissions by more than 10%. And I talked about the nacelles. Those technological components are continuing to be moved forward here for us as we make sure that we aren't falling short of the objectives we have in Europe and around the world for being neutral with respect to carbon emissions.
So there are sort of various competing visions about the disruptive technology that may be needed. There was a lot of attention earlier this year when Airbus came out and said hydrogen is the way to go, an even bigger leap forward, if you like. Now that remains to be seen which one of those technologies plays out most effectively. But where would you fit in, for example, to the hydrogen plane? Is there a role for you there?
Well, of course, our sister company, Pratt & Whitney, obviously, if you hear Chris talk about that business, they're looking at multiple technologies that potentially, including hydrogen, that would contribute. And I think my key way I think about this, Tim, is that there's not just one solution. I think you're going to see improvements in today's propane burning engines. You're going to see hybrid electric, and you're going to see solutions like hydrogen, and you're going to see combinations of those, I think, as you see them advance at different paces. And so I think what would be prudent is that we continue to advance all those technologies that have the opportunity to contribute that way. And that's the approach that we're taking both within Collins and I know across Raytheon Technologies, including Pratt.
What are the other technologies that you see that are on your radar at the moment? Automation, sensors is something that comes to mind. We talk a lot, and perhaps we'll come back to this, we talk a lot about sensors, pitot tubes, which operate on a design that is essentially 200 years old, if I'm not mistaken. How can a company like yours revolutionize that side of the industry?
Well, the simple answer is that we're continuing to take all of our sensors and figure out ways to digitize them. We're looking at new systems from, you're right, AOA or pitot tubes that are very physical or mechanical today into being digital. That digital gives you tremendous advantages for how you take that information and use it for efficiency purposes. Specifically for us, and I use the example around connectivity, autonomy is interesting that way. With some of these sensors and the capabilities they bring, one of the things we're very focused on is a kind of a three-step process around reduced crew operations. We know today that it's important for us to operate an aircraft efficiently and safely, and you do that through putting less workload on pilots. So we're looking at reduced crew operations as well as then ultimately working to single pilot operations. The numbers I was looking at is 40% of the 1.6 million flights per year require an extra 1 or 2 pilots. And so one of the things we know that reduced crew operations can lead to is single pilot operations, providing us systems that are even more capable today to help the pilot in command efficiently operate the airplane, which creates even more, not only savings, but of course, a more sustainable answer and a safe answer. And so really every domain and dimension you're talking about, whether it's sensors, whether it's the systems and seats, you brought up interiors earlier, as we think about how that contributes to some of the COVID and other pandemic risk issues, across the areas I said, connected ecosystem, the autonomy, the electric or hybrid electric, the integrated systems, the connected battle space. Those are all areas we're focused on taking the solutions that we have and advancing them in more digital ways, to your question, and putting them together in a way that creates the solution, always focused on what problem are you trying to solve.
I can't leave our discussion without mentioning important news this week, obviously, the 737 MAX, on which you're a major supplier, was authorized for flight again. Now, obviously, Boeing has been in the front line here, but Collins did contribute to some of the systems which have been widely publicized as a result of these 2 crashes. What have you, as a company, learned from these crises, and what are you going to do differently?
First of all, I think the news is important here that the industry needs to have a confidence building mode here as we enter 2021. And so having the FAA and now the other regulators moving towards that opening is important for the industry. For us at Collins, one of the things I'll tell you is that as all of aerospace step back and examine what we do to make sure we're providing a safe set of systems that we provide and a culture that ensures it, is something that we've always stepped back and examined. And what I can tell you is that through our experience here and interacting with regulators, the 2 things I look for in particular are our processes robust and safe? And number 1, and probably more importantly, is the culture one that allows for people to feel like they can bring forward risks or concerns around anything, especially including safety. And we got that validation through the process, which I'll tell you was good. Regulators and others were very complimentary of our product safety boards, our non-advocacy reviews, the open risk discussions we have around our designs before they're finalized, implemented, and delivered. So I walk away always feeling like you should continue to examine and pressure test whether you should do more and can do more, and we'll always look for that continuous improvement. But I walk away confident that both our processes and, more importantly, our culture ensure that our systems are safe.
What, if anything, though, have you changed? Have you changed reporting lines? Have you got any new oversight measures? What are you doing differently?
Well, when we came together, remember, we came together as both what was Rockwell Collins and United Technologies. And what's really been interesting is we've had really good, both robust processes in both. So the timing of this allowed us to examine both. And we ended up implementing and or modifying our processes, whether it be developmental processes, more importantly, the non-advocacy product processes, in this product safety discipline, which is it's really impressive in terms of how we examine the products and the safety confirmation that we have, both through development and even after we've delivered our products, to ensure they continue to operate the way they were intended. So we've merged those 2 together through this process. Remember, we came together in November of 2018, and we've implemented those common processes. And as I said, what gives me a lot of confidence is when the regulators who examine those as part of the way that we often interact with them have confirmed and given us some confidence that we're doing it the right way.
Okay, well, Steve, Timm, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating tour around the world, around the industry, multiple technologies. You obviously have a very challenging task ahead of you, but it's been a fantastic insight to see how you view this crisis and the future shape of aviation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. I look forward to being able to contribute to this recovery and see what we can do to accelerate what we all know is ultimately going to become something we'll work through together. The faster, the better.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Tim.